Hello, this is Patty Young, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 16th issue of the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. 2026 FIFA World Cup. Hochul signs bill to extend bar hours. New York bars, restaurants, and other licensed establishments will be allowed to serve alcohol until 4 a.m. during the 2026 FIFA World Cup under legislation signed by Governor Kathy Hochul. The measure, signed June 9th, temporarily extends alcohol service hours statewide from June 11th through July 20th, covering the duration of the tournament. The new law allows on-premises liquor license holders to sell alcoholic beverages until 4 a.m., regardless of more restrictive county-adopted closing times. The temporary extension applies from the opening day of the World Cup on June 11th through July 20th, the day after the championship match. The change does not apply to establishments where the state liquor authority has imposed earlier closing hours as a condition of a license. The law expires July 21st. Hochul, businesses should benefit from World Cup visitors. The World Cup is coming to New York, and I want every New Yorker and local business to be a part of the action and celebration. No ticket required, Hochul said in a statement. From the first kick to the last whistle, bars and restaurants across our state can stay open throughout the tournament, bringing the New Yorkers together to cheer on every goal and supporting small businesses across the state. State officials expect the tournament to bring more than 1 million visitors to the region. Part of broader World Cup planning. The legislation builds on other state efforts tied to the 2026 FIFA World Cup, including a new state liquor authority World Cup one-day permit that allows organizers to host off-site fan events, public watch parties, and expanded outdoor activations. State Liquor Authority Chair Lily Fan said restaurants, bars, and hospitality businesses will play a major role in welcoming visitors from around the world during the tournament. County by county closing times. The temporary law overrides local closing time restrictions that are currently set on a county by county basis across New York. Readers can view the current county by county closing hour breakdown through the State Liquor Authority website. During the World Cup period, eligible establishments statewide will be permitted to remain open and serve alcohol until 4 a.m., regardless of those local restrictions. Key provisions of the law. Alcohol service may continue until 4 a.m. from June 11th through July 20th. The law applies to on-premises license holders, including bars and restaurants. Local county closing time restrictions are temporarily suspended. SLA imposed restrictions on individual licenses remain in effect. The legislation automatically expires July 21st. Flag factory workers stitch disputed symbol. Employees ignore politics ahead of America's 250th. Inside this cavernous warehouse off U.S. Route 58, thin strips of red and white cotton cascade over nearly every surface. The strips are piled high in plastic bins, sprawled over tables, and fed underneath bobbing needles. The whir of dozens of sewing machines working at once fills the stark concrete room. At this 200,000 square foot factory, seamstresses work 8 and sometimes 12 hours a day, weaving together the American flag. Their company, Anin Flag Makers, is one of the few companies still making the flag in the United States and bills itself as the oldest and largest manufacturer of the flag in the country. Since its founding in 1847, Anin's flags have marked the country's highest highs and lowest lows. Its flags hung at President Abraham Lincoln's inauguration and draped his coffin. They flew atop Mount Suribachi after the Battle of Iwo Jima and rocketed to the moon aboard Apollo 11. As political disagreements have splintered the nation, Americans of every political persuasion have raised the flag to display pride or protest. They've brandished it at campaign rallies, burned it in dissent, and laid it next to the graves of fallen soldiers. Once a unifying symbol, The flag has come to represent political alienation for some. Rioters who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, waved Old Glory as they broke windows and busted doors in an attempt to prevent the transfer of power. Demonstrators protesting President Donald Trump at No Kings rallies have sought to reclaim the emblem to show their allegiance to the country's founding principles. Yet the workers who stitched together American flags say they don't worry much about how people will use them once they're shipped out the door. Each holds a different and deeply personal relationship with the symbol. Most believe it represents freedom. Just don't ask what freedom means to them. There's one rule on the factory floor, said 31-year-old Amber Davis. Leave politics, money, and religion at the door. Davis and a group of 3 other young women pushed the fabric of blue handheld flags through the sewing machines. They were part of an order for America 250, the nonpartisan group tasked by Congress with planning this year's milestone commemoration. The organization is distributing hundreds of thousands of handheld flags at sporting events and community celebrations as part of an initiative called America Waves. Employees at an inn will touch every single one. For them, the run-up to the 4th of July is a dizzying sprint. It's their busiest season of the year. Davis has worked at the factory for about a decade. Over that time, Davis said, she has sewn all types of symbols, including Ukrainian, Iranian, and Confederate flags. Anin ceased production of the Confederate flag in 2015, citing its representation of hatred and division. The American flag has never been among those Davis shudders to make. No matter what's going on in the world, this is our job, Davis said. We've seen them all. When Melanie Bullock, 32, began working at an inn a few months ago, she said she felt like she was stitching herself into history. The first time she sewed together the blue and red edges of the country's flag, she was overcome with a strange sense of connection. The flag has a different meaning for everyone, she said. For her, it's a reminder of her mother, a military veteran. It goes back to family. It goes back to her strength, she said. Sewing the flag, I feel like I still get to pay respect to my mom. Nearby, 26-year-old Marilisa Nunez said she considered something else meaningful every time the Stars and Stripes crossed her desk. A better life, Nunez said. Her parents immigrated to the United States from Mexico. As she reached for a piece of fabric, Sandy Doss nodded along to the music blaring from her headphones. The job at an inn was a second chance. A year earlier, the mother of 2 said she had been in prison. Gazing at the flag in front of her, Doss smiled. She felt a wave of pride. You're driving down the road and you see a flag, and you're like, oh, I probably made that, Doss said. You feel accomplished because you had a hand in that. In recent years, Anin's flags have flown at highway service stations, high schools, the White House, and in outer space. An Anin flag was aboard the Artemis II mission in April, which took astronauts to the farthest distance from Earth humans have ever traveled. Sales of the flag have ebbed through changes in domestic politics. Demand dipped during the Great Depression and Vietnam War and rose amid the patriotic fervor of World War II and the nation's 1976 bicentennial. Presidential elections are almost always met with a spike in new orders. Talika Chappell, 55, sang gospel songs as she maneuvered long stripes of red and white onto her desk. In all her years working at an inn, she said, she hadn't thought much about what the flag meant to her. She cared only that the women who worked under her didn't drag it on the floor. Near the front of the warehouse, workers operate an ink-splattered machine as it stamps 3 by 5 foot pieces of white fabric with 13 crisp stripes and a field of stars. After each print, the machine washes the leftover pigment from its gears, turning the once distinctly red and blue dyes into an oozing purple liquid. Watch the rhythm of the churn for too long and the chemical scent might make one lightheaded. Or, for Mark Lane, sentimental. Anin's operations director has strode past this scene every workday for more than 2 decades. On one spring morning, as Lane watched the machine spool the finished flags, he reflected on a trip he'd recently taken with his grandchildren to the 9/11 Memorial and Museum in New York City. Lane stared for a long time at the reflection pools there. As they walked away, his grandson spotted a handheld American flag stuck in a crevice next to one of the 2,983 names etched in bronze. It was an Annan flag. Tears welled in Lane's eyes as he recounted the story. What a glorious thing to be able to make, he said. Britain okays social media ban for under 16s. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said on June 15th he would ban social media sites for children under 16 years old and impose restrictions on gaming and live streaming platforms in a push against big tech that goes further than any other country. The sweeping changes will give kids their childhood back, Starmer told reporters, outlining measures against Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, and other platforms, as well as gaming sites that allow strangers to contact children. It is clear to me a full ban is the right choice, he said. It will make a huge difference. It will make our children safer. It will make our children happier. It will give them more time, more security, more freedom to grow up, more opportunity. However, some experts doubted whether a blanket ban would be effective, and Starmer acknowledged it would be difficult to fully enforce such restrictions. Britain will go further than Australia, the first country to ban social media for children, with controls on gaming platforms and the possibility of overnight curfews and curbs on infinite scrolling for kids under 18. YouTube, Facebook, and X will be covered, the government said, but messaging services such as WhatsApp and Signal will not be. World-leading blocks on live streaming and strangers contacting children would also be imposed, Starmer said. Is there a situation in the offline world where you would just let your child pair up with a stranger, an adult that you don't know anything about, he said? Services designed for children and education, such as YouTube Kids, Lego Play, and Google Classroom, will not be affected by the ban, he said. While a majority of parents and politicians back a ban, some psychologists and researchers have said there is no proof that it would work, and a group of school children in London told Reuters that they had a conflicted relationship with the technology. Social media companies have already put in place child safety measures, such as new algorithms in response to tightening regulations, including by Britain. They said on June 15th that a blanket ban could push young people onto riskier platforms that did not offer the protections they had introduced. YouTube said it had invested in expert-led, age-appropriate experiences and default protections for teens for over a decade. Snapchat said an outright ban would disconnect teens from private messaging between friends and family that accounted for the majority of time spent on its service, adding that the scope of the ban should be reviewed. 3 killed when car crashes into tree in Genesee County. 3 people were killed early Sunday, June 14th, in a single vehicle crash in Genesee County, New York, according to the Genesee County Sheriff's Office. Emergency dispatchers received a 911 call reporting a motor vehicle collision on Prohl Road in the town of Stafford at 2:01 a.m. June 14th. Sheriff's deputies identified the driver as Joseph A. Martinez, 23, of Pavilion. The vehicle's passengers were identified as Dylan S. Pearson, 23, of Batavia, and Megan R. Merrill, 22, of Batavia. All 3 occupants were pronounced dead at the scene by the Genesee County Coroner's Office. According to a preliminary investigation, the black 2012 Nissan Altima was traveling north on Prohl Road when it left the west shoulder of the roadway, struck a tree, and came to rest. Investigators have not released additional details about what may have caused the crash. The crash remains under investigation by the Genesee County Sheriff's Office, Investigative Division, and Crash Management Team. Assisting at the scene were members of the Genesee County Coroner's Office, New York State Police, the Stafford Fire Department, Town of Batavia Fire Department, and Mercy Emergency Medical Systems. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. New York tax preparer sentenced in $50 million Ponzi scheme. A Madison County tax preparer who admitted operating a decades-long Ponzi scheme that defrauded nearly 1,000 investors out of more than $50 million has been sentenced to state prison, New York Attorney General Letitia James announced. Miles Burton Marshall, 74, of Hamilton, was sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison after pleading guilty in April to second-degree grand larceny, securities fraud under the Martin Act, and first-degree scheme to defraud. According to prosecutors, Marshall operated a fraudulent investment program known as the 8% Fund for more than 30 years, promising investors annual returns of 8% while claiming their money would be used primarily for real estate investments. Instead, authorities said Marshall used money from new investors to pay returns for earlier investors, cover expenses for his other businesses, and fund personal spending, including travel, shopping, and dining. The Office of the Attorney General said Marshall's scheme ran from the early 1990s through March 2023 and affected 988 investors, many of whom were his tax preparation and insurance clients in Madison County and surrounding areas. Investigators found that Marshall directed employees to create false account statements showing fictitious balances and earnings, leading investors to believe their money was generating steady returns. By 2016, prosecutors said Marshall's liabilities exceeded his assets by more than $40 million, but he continued soliciting investments and assuring clients their accounts remained profitable. Authorities said many victims lost their life savings and retirement funds. Some were forced to return to work after retirement, while others could no longer help support elderly relatives, family members with disabilities, or college expenses for children and grandchildren. Bankruptcy filings showed Marshall had less than $22 million in assets as of March 2023, while owing investors more than $90 million, including principal and accrued interest. As part of the case, Marshall entered judgments totaling approximately $85 million in favor of the 988 victims, including principal and interest. For more than 30 years, Miles Burton Marshall scammed his clients out of their life savings in a classic Ponzi scheme, James said in a statement. If you attempt to scam New Yorkers out of their hard-earned money, my office will bring you to justice. The investigation was conducted by the Attorney General's Criminal Enforcement and Financial Crimes Bureau with assistance from the New York State Police, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. 7-year-old critically injured in Canandaigua boating accident. A 7-year-old child was critically injured Saturday after falling from a moving pontoon boat on Canandaigua Lake and being struck by the boat's propeller, according to the Ontario County Sheriff's Office. Deputies responded around 5:30 p.m. to the lake house in the city of Canandaigua for a reported boating injury. Investigators said the child was riding on a pontoon boat with family members about a mile offshore when a large wave lifted the child out of the boat. The child landed in the water between the boat's two pontoons. The vessel then passed over the child, and the propeller struck the child's leg, causing a severe laceration. Authorities described the injuries as critical. The child's father and other adults aboard the boat jumped into the water and pulled the child back onto the vessel before returning to shore. Once on land, deputies, Canandaigua Emergency Medical Services personnel, and bystanders assisted in stabilizing the child. The child was flown by Mercy Flight to Strong Memorial Hospital in Rochester for treatment. The Ontario County Sheriff's Office is investigating the incident. Get your strawberry desserts at Ionia United Methodist Church. It's that time of year again. Ionia United Methodist Church's annual Strawberry Social will be held from 4:30 to 6:30 p.m. June 18th or until sold out at the church, 2120 Elton Road in the West Bloomfield hamlet of Ionia. Guests can dine in or take out is available. The menu includes hot dogs, hamburgers, sausages, salads, and desserts such as strawberry shortcake, strawberry sundaes, and chocolate sauce over vanilla ice cream. Items are priced a la carte. E-bike rider critically injured in Rochester hit and run. A person riding an electric bicycle suffered life-threatening injuries after being struck by a vehicle that fled the scene Saturday night in Rochester, police said. Rochester police responded around 8:50 p.m. to the 1100 block of West Ridge Road for a reported hit-and-run crash. Investigators said two people on separate electric bicycles were stopped in a grassy median on the north side of Ridge Road when a vehicle traveling west struck one of the riders. The vehicle continued westbound and left the scene, according to police. Rider hospitalized. The injured rider was transported by ambulance to Strong Memorial Hospital with life-threatening injuries. The second bicyclist was not injured. Investigation ongoing. No other injuries were reported. Police said no suspects were in custody as of Saturday night. The investigation remains ongoing. Rochester police investigate fatal Sunday shooting. A 19-year-old Rochester man was shot to death on East Main Street in Rochester over the weekend. According to Rochester police, the fatal shooting occurred on East Main Street, several blocks west of Culver Road, around 2:45 p.m. on Sunday. The man was shot at least once in his upper body and was taken to Strong Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced dead, said Captain Greg Bello of the Rochester Police Department. His name was not released pending notification of family. No charges have been filed in connection with the shooting death, which marked Rochester's fourth homicide of 2026, according to RPD's open data portal. Officers are investigating the fatal shooting. U.S. deal with Iran leaves uncertainty. Nuclear program still point of contention. The United States and Iran were set to begin a week of high-stakes diplomacy after announcing on June 14th a framework deal to end the war and reopen the Strait of Hormuz, a preliminary agreement that has already pushed oil prices lower but leaves the fate of Iran's nuclear program to future negotiations. The deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete, President Donald Trump said in a Truth Social post on June 15th. Congratulations to all. I hereby fully authorize the toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz and simultaneously herewith authorize the immediate removal of the United States naval blockade. After the United States and Israel started the war, Iran began exercising control over the Strait of Hormuz, imposing maritime fees and transit regulations for vessels passing along the vital trade route. Trump has said that the Strait of Hormuz, a key waterway for 20% of the world's oil and natural gas, will reopen as part of a preliminary agreement between the United States and Iran. Vice President J.D. Vance said he expects the strait to be open toll-free in the long term and hopes the text of the preliminary agreement with Iran will be released in the coming days. A memorandum of understanding tied to the deal outlines a suspension of any tolls in the strait for 60 days, followed by plans for regional talks about the future, the New York Times reported. Iran had not charged tolls on the Strait of Hormuz before the war, meaning the deal largely restores conditions that existed before it. Vance, no more back channels. Mediators will be facilitating a series of meetings before the agreement is expected to be formally signed on June 19th in Switzerland. In an interview on CNBC, Vance said Iran's foreign minister and House Speaker will represent Iran at the signing. Many details of the deal are still to be sorted out, he added. Vance said the United States is now in direct talks with Iranian leaders, a range of whom are expected to attend the formal signing. We're not passing messages through various back channels anymore. We're actually talking to them, Vance said. And when you talk to them, you figure out what's real, what's fake, what are they serious about, what are they not serious about. The vice president added that Washington is willing to change its relationship with the Iranian regime if its leaders are willing to change their relationship with the United States. Mine removal will be critical. Trump, the morning of June 15th, was traveling to the Group of Seven meeting in France, where the framework will be a major topic of discussion. G7 nations, Britain and France, are leading a coalition of nations that have volunteered to help demine the Strait of Hormuz and ensure the safe passage of commercial ships once fighting in Iran has ceased. Shipping companies in Asia and Europe said confidence in restoring travel through the waterway could take weeks to rebuild despite the U.S.-Iran deal. Oil prices fell about 5% on June 15th, based on the agreement to halt fighting while talks continue about Iran's nuclear program. But shippers want to hear about plans to remove the mines. Initial reactions in the shipping industry are muted. Jisk Bank analyst Haider Anjum said in a note to clients, "The shipping companies probably want to wait until it's clear that the agreement holds, as we have already had Hormuz open for a very short time twice before." Many details still to come. While the agreement is expected to reopen the strait and bring an end to the fighting, many key details remain unresolved, including how the two sides will address Iran's nuclear program and Israel's strikes against Iran-backed group Hezbollah in Lebanon. In an interview with the New York Times, Trump said if Iran failed to reach a final nuclear accord with the United States, he would restart military attacks on Tehran or make the United States the guardian of the Middle East in return for 20% of the region's revenues. Meanwhile, fighting eased in southern Lebanon after the deal was announced, but authorities warned more than 1 million people who have evacuated during the war not to rush home. Pakistan, which mediated the truce between Tehran and Washington, said the deal called for the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon, where Hezbollah has attacked Israel. The declaration brought relative calm to southern Lebanon, Reuters reported, based on Lebanese and foreign security sources. But Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said his country wouldn't withdraw from security zones in southern Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria, and would retaliate if attacked. UN calls for maximum restraint. The United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk on June 15th praised the preliminary agreement between the United States and Iran and urged the countries to exercise restraint so a lasting peace deal can be reached. "I welcome the announcement that the United States and Iran have agreed on a peace deal that provides for an immediate and permanent ceasefire, the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and a framework for further negotiations," he said in a statement. "At this fragile moment, it is clear all sides need to exercise maximum restraint and work to implement the agreement reached quickly and in good faith," he added. In a televised phone interview with Fox News on June 14th, Vice President Vance acknowledged the recent Israeli strikes in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, saying U.S. officials were worried Iran might retaliate, but were assured the country would not. "I'm not going to say that everybody's going to sing Kumbaya tomorrow," Vance told the network. "It's going to take a little bit of time to learn the ways of peace, but I do think we took a major step tonight." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat and Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. 10 killed in Russian attacks on Ukraine. Historic Kiev monastery badly damaged in strikes. A 1,000-year-old monastery that symbolizes Ukraine's spiritual and cultural heritage was badly damaged in the heaviest Russian aerial attack on Kiev in 2 weeks, authorities said June 15th, while 10 people were killed nationwide in the overnight strikes. France's foreign minister said the attack on the Kiev Peshek Lavra Monastery, a UNESCO World Heritage Site founded in 1051, was akin to bombing Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The Russian strikes came after Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said on June 14th that he had discussed with U.S. President Donald Trump efforts to secure an end to the more than 4-year conflict ahead of a G7 meeting in France. A Russian strike on the Kiev Peshek Lavra set the Dormition Cathedral on fire, a church whose history dates back to the 11th century, and this is one of Russia's most serious crimes against Christian culture to date, Zelensky said on X. "This is an attack on our history," he said later. while visiting the damaged monastery and adding, "Of course, everything will be restored." As flames leapt above the religious compound, Kiev residents took shelter underground in the worst Russian attack on Ukraine since early June, when drones and missiles killed more than 20 people and left more than 100 wounded. Russia denied striking the monastery and said it had been damaged by a U.S.-made Patriot air defense missile, but Zelensky said during a visit to the site that it was struck by a Russian drone. A source familiar with the situation provided Reuters with a photo of what he said was Russian drone debris found near the damaged cathedral building in the Lavra. Reuters was not immediately able to confirm its authenticity. Kremlin Antichrist. What more must the Kremlin Antichrist do for the world to realize that the decisive action must be taken so that the Russian terror against Ukraine on the very principles of peace come to an end? Metropolitan Epiphany, head of the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, said on X. 4 people were killed and 34 were injured in the overnight strikes on Kiev, said Timur Shevchenko, the head of the capital's military administration. Kiev's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, later said a 5th person had died in the hospital from their injuries. A Russian strike on Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city, killed 4 emergency service rescuers and a municipal official and injured at least 5 other people, Interior Minister Ihor Klemko said on Telegram. 3 people, including a child, were also wounded in the northeastern city of Sumy, local authorities said in social media posts. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian drone attack on the Russian city of Tula, an industrial cluster south of Moscow, killed 3 people and injured 3 others, including a 1-year-old child, the regional governor said in a Telegram post. Russia and Ukraine both deny deliberately attacking civilians. Reuters could not independently confirm the reports. Ukraine's military said Russia had launched 70 missiles and 611 drones against Ukraine overnight, and that its air defenses had shot down 50 missiles and 582 drones of various types. Ballistic missiles remain a problem for us, Air Force spokesperson Yuri Itnat said on national television. Of the 34 ballistic missiles launched, only 15 were shot down, although that is a strong result. Neighboring Poland, a European Union and NATO member, scrambled fighter jets on June 15th against a possible airspace incursion before recalling the alert and saying no sky violation had been recorded, its armed forces said on X. European condemnation. European leaders condemned the attack on the Kiev monastery. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which for us in France is the equivalent of Notre Dame or Saint-Denis being bombed, said French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot as he arrived for a meeting of EU foreign ministers. The EU's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, called the attack a war crime. French President Emmanuel Macron said G7 leaders meeting in France would discuss how to end the war in Ukraine. Before the June 14th conversation with Trump, Zelensky had proposed direct talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin for a ceasefire solution involving the United States and Europe, something Britain, Germany, and France supported, but Putin rebuffed. Ukraine has recently intensified attacks on Russian industrial and energy facilities as it tries to deprive Moscow of revenues and hasten an end to the war. Overnight, Ukraine hit 2 bridges connecting Crimea with Russian-controlled areas. The Black Sea Peninsula, seized by Russia in 2014, is already grappling with a fuel crisis as a result of Ukrainian attacks that have disrupted supplies. Some sports news. Victor powers past Garden City for 5th straight crown. Noting the veteran core from last season lost to graduation and a preseason injury to a crucial player, Victor coach Jean Haggerty admits she thought the clock was ticking on her team's dynastic run in girls lacrosse. Turns out there's plenty of gas left in this tank. For the 5th consecutive year, the Blue Devils are New York State champions after defeating Garden City 8 in the NYSPHSAA Class B final 13-5 on Saturday. With the win, Victor becomes only the second team in state history to reel off 5 straight girls lacrosse titles. Garden City, the Blue Devils, opponent on the last 2 years, is the only other to pull off such a feat. The Trojans won 7 in a row from 2006 to 2012. I'm overwhelmed with emotion. This was not how we thought the year was going to go, said Haggerty, Victor's coach since 2024. We had 30 girls that stepped up and showed who Victor was today. We don't do it for the trophy, we do it for each other. Haggerty had understandable reasons for pessimism when the season started. 3 of Victor's 4 leading scorers from last season were seniors, as well as several key defenders. And the lone expected returner from that offensive group, Allie Pisano, injured her knee during winter sports and missed the spring season. Victor gave its coach reason to believe during a late April trip to perennial contender South Jefferson. Trailing in the fourth quarter of that game and down a player after a card, the Blue Devils rallied in the fourth quarter to win. That was the first glimpse, Haggerty said. They played so hard and fought back. That was the grit that we're used to. That's how you win states, with grit like that. Victor then pushed through an arduous Class B section tournament that included multiple overtime wins, one of which required a last-second goal to force extra time. The other, some gumption after a fourth quarter slip-up. Surviving Section 5 was, according to Haggerty, the hardest thing we've ever done. The conclusion of every season inspires change, and this one is no different. Victor's 2 top goal scorers, Cameron Adred and McKenna Anderson, are both seniors. So is starting goalie Mia Finocchiaro. Those 3 are among the 10 impending graduates. There's no question, regardless of possible obstacles between now and then, Victor expects to be back challenging for number 6 next spring. And when that time comes, as previous alumni have done for the current team, Adred plans to be on site to cheer on another title. I will be here next year. I love our underclassmen, Adred, a Princeton commit, said. It really is a dynasty. Everyone wants us to win, and everyone keeps coming back because it's the best place to be. Victor lacrosse is like no other. Victor's scoring depth wins out. When scouting an opponent, it's commonplace to single out a player or 2 that need extra attention. How an opposing team takes that approach against Victor, Haggerty doesn't know. Entering the state final, Victor already had 6 players with 20-plus goals this season. Game planning for such depth resembles a game of whack-a-mole. We always say, how are they going to match up against us? We have 8 or 9 shooters, Haggerty said. Even a good defense can't lock all of them down. Garden City was the latest in a long line of frustrated defenses. 4 different players, Adred, Anderson, Gianna Hedden, and Carlina DeFondi, had multi-goal games. Anderson, who was shut out in the first half, scored 4 consecutive Victor goals in the second half. The senior had a hat trick in the third quarter alone, and one of those goals came while a player down. There's so many threats you can't guard one girl. The other 6 can do the work, Adred said. It really allows for a creative offense and the ability to rely on your teammates. You always know if you're not having a great game, the girls on your left and right can do it for you. High school boys lacrosse. Victor falls in state final to Manhasset. The thinnest of margins has separated Victor from its opponent in the program's 3 recent state final appearances. Whether it's by an inch or a mile, though, offers little respite for the Blue Devils, who are once again left wondering why the season's last game didn't swing their way. Making its 3rd appearance in 4 years, Victor fell to Section 8's Manhasset 10-7 in Saturday's NYSPHSAA Class B final at Hobart and William Smith Colleges. The Blue Devils are now .500 in their 8 championship game appearances. 3 of those defeats in 2023-2024 and this season are by a combined 5 goals. Clearly, the difference between a champion and runner-up is razor thin. While he expects his team will endure the several stages of grief, Victor coach Dan Stone thinks his players' heads should be held high. They completely elevated anything you could ever expect from a team. When they talk about being a family, they truly are. As a coach with a group of young men like that, you couldn't ask for anything better, Stone said. The sun will rise tomorrow. It's going to hurt. It's going to sting. But I have complete faith they'll take care of each other all the way through. Victor has a habit of reloading, and there's plenty of promising returners that suggest the Blue Devils could be back in this position a year from now. While it's a bitter end for the team's 10 seniors, Stone offered a final message to his departures. I'll echo this every time I see them, whether it's out and about over the summer or whether I'm fortunate enough to be invited to gatherings in the years to come. I love you and keep being awesome. Injury in second quarter changes tide. At its core, lacrosse is a game of possession. That's why face-off specialists are so often crucial to success. Owning the X means owning the ball, and owning the ball allows teams to dictate pace of play. Victor usually has one of New York State's best at its disposal. Sophomore Eli Ritchie had won face-offs at a 78% clip this season, and with 45 goals was also an important member of the Blue Devils offense. He was recently named an All-American, a rarity for underclassmen. That's why a sequence in the second quarter might have decided the game. It's when Ritchie, with Victor ahead 3-2, limped off the field with an apparent leg injury and did not return. While long stick defender Oliver Cowell stepped in and performed admirably at the X, Ritchie's absence took a toll. Hats off to Manhasset, they certainly earned it and deserved it. We were fortunate to compete the way we did, considering the circumstances, Stone said. We haven't had to put 3 poles out there all season long, but I thought we did as good a job as we could have in that moment. Victor needed its defense to pitch a perfect game in the second half, and that unit nearly did. Manhasset was held scoreless for the final 10 minutes of the third quarter and well into the fourth. That allowed Victor to claw back and tie the game on fourth quarter goals from Matthew Herendeen and Gage Hay. The dam broke in the final 5 minutes, though. Manhasset scored 4 straight goals, ensuring another state final loss for Victor. With the shot clock, you're playing 70 seconds worth of defense, trying to make sure you account for 6 guys, Stone said. There's bound to be fatigue, mental and physical, and we did the best we could with what we had. Earth, Wind & Fire documentary explores fame, funk, and friction. The music of Earth, Wind & Fire has always contained another element, transcendence, but the level of mysticism within the band and the exploration of the musical threads pulled from jazz, funk, and R&B to create an enduring meditation such as That's the Way of the World or the silken groove that fuels fantasy has never really been excavated. That changes with their new documentary, Earth, Wind & Fire, To Be Celestial versus That's the Weight of the World, which premiered at the Tribeca Festival in New York June 3rd and is available on HBO. Directed by Amir Questlove Thompson, the 2-hour film is a kaleidoscopic joyride weaving through memories of one of the most influential bands, both musically and visually, and also solidifying their presence in the Hall of Greats. It's nice to get your flowers while you're still alive, the band's percussionist Ralph Johnson says in an interview with EWF singer Philip Bailey and bassist Verdine White a day before the documentary's Tribeca bow. Along with riveting archival footage, Questlove, a skilled documentarian, Summer of Soul, Sly Lives, as well as an ace drummer with The Roots, corralled a heady lineup of outside voices, former President Barack Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama, Stevie Wonder, Lionel Richie, and family members to offer insights. The blissful undercurrents stitched into Earth, Wind & Fire's music are always prevalent, but so is the reality of founder Maurice White's mercurial nature. Among longtime partner Marilyn White, longtime Earth, Wind & Fire engineer George Massenberg, and band members themselves, stories about White being aloof and slow to give credit to anyone are rife. Cabra and White recognizes that between his father's musical obsessions and own abandonment issues from childhood. He didn't know how to be a dad. Earth, Wind, and Fire was the most important thing to him all the time. Still, the core Earth, Wind, and Fire trio believes Maurice, who died in 2016 from Parkinson's disease, would have approved of the film. That's a credit to Quest and KB that the story was told honestly, but without trying to disrupt the unity of the history of the band. We still work together tightly, Bailey tells USA Today. Some people could have taken this story and done some things that weren't so savory. Sometimes people are looking for the scuttlebutt because that sells too. Here are some of the highlights and revelations from the documentary. Real meaning behind 21st Night of September. Every fall, without fail, the memes come out. The opening line of Earth, Wind, and Fire's intoxicating 1978 hit September. Do you remember the 21st night of September? Has always included the lingering question of the meaning of the date. Even White's co-writers Allie Willis and Al McKay went along with White's assertion that it was just a random date. But as Marilyn White reveals, the famous date was the expected arrival of Cabron. Though their son arrived prematurely in August, the date stuck and is now part of music history. Marilyn also talks about her partner's infidelity and White's response when she confronted him about it. I'm a star, she recalls White saying. I can do whatever the expletive I want. Origin of Badiya chorus in September. Another hallmark of September is the gleeful chant coupled with the chorus that still launches fans out of their seats at live shows. When asked in the documentary the meaning of the memorable Badiya-dee-da, Johnson laughs and says, "It means whatever you want it to be." In their interview, the trio is slightly more explanatory. I always think of Philip when I hear it, Johnson says. Bailey elaborates. Badiya is really a Brazilian scat that me and Maurice used to always listen to with Sergio Mendes' band Brazil 66. So if we didn't have lyrics for certain things, we'd Badiya it. Certain songs, like Earth, Wind, and Fire's Brazilian Rhyme, just sounded good doing that alone. It just became one of those signature things that we do in melodies. Adds Verdon White, it's the gift that keeps on giving, he says, and live, it's upbeat, it's happy, everybody just smiles. Maurice White's hiatus blindside. Following years of mega success on the charts and on stage, it would have been expected for Earth, Wind, and Fire to keep the momentum going. Instead, in 1983, White summoned the band to their headquarters to tell them he was putting Earth, Wind, and Fire on the back burner, ostensibly to foster a solo career. Bailey, Johnson, and Verdine White were stunned enough, but then White continued the insult to injury and told them to remove their wardrobes from their lockers immediately or they would be sold. It was definitely a shaker, Verdine says in the film. The financial whiplash caused Bailey to sell his California property and move to Denver. My credit card bounced, he recalls. Johnson, as he details further in his recent book, Rhythm and Fire, turned to jobs in construction and at a local stereo shop to pay his bills. Apology for the misinterpretation of reasons. That slinky groove, Bailey's aching falsetto, and lyrics about craving your body and longing to love you all seem like a recipe for seduction. But Bailey explains in the documentary, Reasons was born after a fling with a fan following a show. After a night of fling with a fan activities, Bailey awoke the next morning to find his bedmate in another room and on the phone with her guy. Turns out, he says, it was just a sex call. He also offers a humorous apology to fans who misinterpreted the lyrics. If you played it at your wedding, I'm sorry. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Democrat Chronicle on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Niche list of best counties to live in New York includes Monroe. A Long Island county has been named the best place to live in New York for the second consecutive year, according to a new ranking from Niche. Niche, a website that reviews and ranks schools, colleges, and communities, ranked Nassau County number 1 among New York's counties based on factors including public schools, housing, jobs, diversity, and access to local amenities. Located directly east of New York City, Nassau County received an A+ overall grade from Niche. The county earned high marks for its public schools, family-friendly communities, diversity, nightlife, and access to amenities. Niche noted that many of the county's roughly 1.3 million residents own their homes and have access to highly rated schools, healthcare systems, restaurants, parks, and other recreational opportunities. However, Nassau County received lower scores for housing affordability, commuting, jobs, and weather. Housing costs remain significantly higher than national averages, according to Niche. The county's median home value is about $658,000, compared with the national median of $303,000. Median monthly rent is $2,195, more than $800 above the national median. Top 10 counties to live in New York. Niche's rankings changed little from last year. Saratoga and Monroe counties each moved up one spot, while Dutchess County entered the top 10, replacing Suffolk County. The top-ranked counties in New York are number 1, Nassau County, number 2, Westchester County, number 3, Albany County, number 4, Saratoga County, number 5, Monroe County, number 6, Tompkins County, number 7, Onondaga County, number 8, Erie County, number 9, Putnam County, number 10, Dutchess County. First meeting a test for new Fed chair. Economists say rate cut could be hard to justify. During Kevin Warsh's swearing in as chair of the Federal Reserve, President Donald Trump told him to be independent and don't look at me, don't look at anybody, just do your own thing and do a great job. That could be put to the test, as Warsh will probably need to deliver unwelcome news to Trump after his first meeting as Fed chair, with markets expecting no change in the central bank's benchmark interest rate, despite Trump's consistent calls for lower borrowing costs. Forecasters expect policymakers to maintain their target for the federal funds rate at a range of 3.5% to 3.75%, as they have so far this year, after their meeting on June 16th and 17th. The Fed typically lowers rates in response to concerns about labor markets to make borrowing cheaper and help stimulate the economy. Generally, it raises them in response to rising inflation to curb spending and guide prices down. Policymakers hold them steady when they feel they are in a good place or when they're waiting on more data to make a decision. Economists say solid job gains and rising inflation tied to the Iran war over the past 3 months have left little room for policymakers to cut. While the president said this month that there is no reason to raise interest rates, in recent weeks, traders have shifted their expectations away from cuts and toward possible rate hikes later this year or in early 2027. For the Fed to cut rates, that would likely need to see some new negative shock to the job market, whether that be worsening of the Mideast conflict or some of the potential downside risks to employment from AI being realized, Bill Adams, Comerica Bank's chief U.S. economist, told USA Today. If that doesn't happen, the Fed will have a hard time justifying a rate cut in the current environment. Warsh served as a Fed governor from 2006 to 2011, when he earned a hawkish reputation, meaning he focused more on taming inflation through higher rates. But as a nominee, he made a case for lower borrowing costs, predicting artificial intelligence-driven productivity gains and a smaller Fed balance sheet could serve as disinflationary forces. Today, I don't think anybody knows what Kevin Warsh's true reaction function is, said Darius Dale, founder and CEO of macro research firm 42 Macro. The second unknown, Dale added, is how receptive his colleagues on the Federal Open Market Committee will be to his vision for the central bank. During his Senate confirmation hearing, Warsh said the institution hadn't delivered on its promises. Recall, he's been basically lambasting them for years and criticizing them in a way that I think would make it really difficult for him to lead this institution, Dale said. These guys are all professionals, and I think, generally speaking, they want good outcomes for the American public, but they're still human beings. Now their new boss is somebody who's been criticizing them publicly for years. Dale also highlighted two of Warsh's key teachers, Stanley Druckenmiller and the late Milton Friedman. He's learned economics from two of the smartest economists in the world history, and they have very different views on how the economy functions relative to current FOMC members, Dale said. He's going to be talking about things that we just haven't heard a central banker in America talk about for decades. Warsh has also advocated for less forward guidance at the Fed. Everyone kind of expects him to be less communicative than not just Powell, but the last three chairs, said David Royal, Chief Financial and Investment Officer at Thrivent, referring to previous Fed Chair Jerome Powell. So he is going to be sort of evasive, which could unsettle markets a little bit over the longer term. When measuring inflation, the Fed typically prefers to look at the Bureau of Economic Analysis's Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index. Its latest release showed PCE rose 3.8% over the year in April. Core PCE, which strips out volatile food and energy costs, rose 3.3% over the year. It also looks at the Consumer Price Index, which, according to the Labor Department's latest report, shows prices rose 4.2% over the year in May, driven by surging gasoline costs and reflecting the sharpest jump in 3 years. Core CPI inflation rose 2.9% over the last month. However, in May, core CPI rose only 0.2%, a slower rate than the 0.4% increase seen in April, and perhaps a sign that higher fuel costs weren't dramatically raising the cost of other goods. Warsh has signaled a preference for another measure known as trimmed mean PCE inflation, which excludes extreme outliers before taking a weighted average. It rose 2.3% over the year in April. Boston College economics professor Brian Bethune said that the trimmed means PCE isn't the most reliable indicator right now. Put simply, it works best when inflation shocks behave similar to the 2009 to 2019 period before the COVID-19 crisis in 2020, when there was a better balance between positive and negative shocks. But when price shocks are predominantly positive due to supply shocks, tariffs, oil spikes, or major unusual sporting events such as the World Cup, it will understate inflation. So hopefully somebody will call him out on that, Bethune said. No matter what index forecasters are looking at, inflation remains above the Fed's 2% target, as it has since the spring of 2021. The Fed's Beige Book will also help inform policymakers' next rate decision. It's a report that provides information on economic conditions across the Fed's 12 districts. The latest Beige Book, released June 3rd, signaled that although wage growth is largely in line with inflation, firms are absorbing higher input costs to preserve customer demand, something that usually happens when businesses feel consumers cannot afford further price increases. Americans appear to agree. The University of Michigan's measure of consumer sentiment fell to an all-time low in May as 57% of respondents said high prices were eroding their personal finances, according to surveys of Consumers Director Joanne Su. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 16th issue of the Democrat Chronicle. Your reader has been Patty Young. Thank you for listening.